Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all. We're back in the pub, me, Pat and Chris, to answer your questions. The first one was sent in by Sivet Berg, and he says, which player outside the top six has impressed you the most and deserves a big money move this summer? Pato, who's impressed you the most?
I'm not going to talk about Aaron Wan-Bissaka because clearly he's going to be a top-class fullback, but I've spoken about him before, we all have now. So I would like to talk about Alexander Mitrovic, who I think has not got the credit he deserves. Like, when a club look like they're going to be relegated, everyone tends to write them off immediately as relegation kind of quality.
Yeah.
But actually, Mitrovic, in a really bad side, has continued to put up decent numbers. I mean, like, he's got 10 goals, 2 assists, which is not that far off what you see from someone like Raul Jimenez, and in a much, much worse side. I mean, Fulham have scored the third least goals in the league.
Yeah.
They've scored 29 goals, I think.
That's embarrassing.
And he's been responsible for like 42% of their expected goals on his own. And it's not even just like he's happening to convert when he gets the chance or he's just taking their penalties or something.
Yeah.
Like, he's getting over 3 shots a game. I think he's 6th in the league for shots per 90.
Jeez.
Which on a side like Fulham, who cannot keep the ball, cannot win the ball, certainly can't defend, is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I imagine he's carving out a lot of those opportunities himself.
Yeah, I mean,
Especially
like,
from headed situations.
about half his shots are coming through headers. So that's
Yeah.
that's a slight concern, but I think he's got decent feet too.
Although he has got some, for a relegated side, the service he's got around him is pretty incredible.
I mean, not necessarily
Yeah.
incredible. I think they're league average, aren't they? We thought that's what would maybe help them survive at the start of the season, producing 10, 11, 12 shots a game.
Yeah.
And as a result of having, Schürrle in the side,
Yeah, I mean,
I suppose your shot numbers are going to be incredibly high. But I don't see the system serving him, shot numbers wise, at the moment, especially with that change in manager. Surely that affected his
Yeah, I don't know. I think
numbers,
I
or maybe
see
not.
where Joe's coming from though, in the sense that I think like Sessegnon, Seri, Vieto, not that
Schürrle.
Vieto's really played. I think those guys are better creators than certainly than you see on
Than
like
a
a
relegation.
Huddersfield
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Cardiff.
Yeah.
Like or Burnley. But to be honest, they do have a system that's built around having a lot of the ball and creating a lot of chances, and they don't have any of the ball and they can't create chances. So I know what you're saying.
And when Ranieri came in, they weren't playing, football that suited their skill set, were they?
Yeah,
They became a lot more pragmatic,
But that's what I like about Mitrovic in a way. Like Mitrovic is
unaffected by the managerial changes.
If you have a lot of the ball, Mitrovic, well, he has only 2 of his goals have come since the turn of the year, but I think that's because Fulham have also had a kind of second plummet, like a double dip.
Never double
But
dip.
I think he's, if you've got a lot of the ball and you're going to get a lot of chances, he's going to get a lot of shots and score goals. If you don't have a lot of the ball, then you can play it long to him, and he will hold it up and bring people around him into the game. I think he's something like 6th in the league, or maybe 4th even for aerial duels, 1 per match. So he can go up against the Premier League's best defenders, who are some of the most physical defenders in the world, and hold his own. I think my one concern is because Fulham paid 27 mil. I don't think they're going to let him go for less than 40 or something, unless he's on wages that would absolutely cripple them.
yeah, which he might well be.
Yeah, but I think they'd rather sell other people. Like, I think you could probably sell Seri on for like 10 to 15 mil, and you keep your 24-year-old striker who can score in the Championship, who can score in the Premier League.
So,
And I think Sessegnon's been good as well,
I think that's
actually.
going to be like a
Sessegnon's
problem.
been underrated too.
I think
league-wide.
Sessegnon has to leave though. Sessegnon has to
Yeah.
go for me.
But these talents at middling or even clubs that are dropping out of the
by
Premier
himself.
League, because they've been bought in for such high amounts, in order to sanction a move to another club, like teams are going to have to come in with some unholy bids. I'm going to,
Yeah, this is my
it
concern
applies to
about
my
your
guy,
choice,
yeah.
Although I would
I'll
say,
reserve
but Fulham might be.
judgment for now.
My point is that Fulham might be forced to sell because you cannot afford to have, as we've seen with clubs in the past. Obviously, Fulham aren't as badly run as the likes of Sunderland, but you cannot afford to have 100 grand a week players playing in the Championship.
But you do
it's
get-
feasibly. It's not. It doesn't work.
They'll still go down with a load of money. Like, coming bottom of the Premier League still gives you a lot of money, and you
Parachute
get parachute
payments,
payments
baby.
as well.
Yeah,
like,
I
in addition to
agree.
that. Plus
But
also
it's
they've got,
a parachute payment is nowhere near the level.
okay,
of
but
getting
for,
a Premier.
but for instance, like Chambers goes back to Arsenal. Vieto goes back to Atleti, I think. So that's going to be a bunch of wages off the book. So you can say, right, okay, we're going to spend those wages on keeping Mitrovic,
Yeah,
and
get
we'll
rid
sell
of
Seri and Ongisa maybe. Like, I mean, I think Ongisa's fantastic, but for whatever reason hasn't gelled at the club. Ship him out to a better side and buy yourself a Championship quality defensive midfielder
Yeah,
who
people-
will cost nothing.
Yeah, I would agree.
There's people less well equipped in that side for the Championship, like obvious candidates, isn't there?
I think though
And they can bring back in like a Stefan Johansson or a Kevin McDonald who were fine in the Championship last season.
I think they'll probably automatically look great in the Championship because their squad's still really good.
Yeah.
And they'll be able to keep the ball in a way they weren't before. I think there are a lot of players there who I think, regardless of how bad Fulham have been, are clearly Premiership quality players. For instance, Tom Kearney looks always like a Premiership quality player.
Yeah.
There's value in these guys, and they're going to keep Kearney.
But do you
I wouldn't sell Sessegnon now because I think his value would have gone down a little bit.
Do you entrust this squad though in the Championship with someone like Scott Parker? Because all of a sudden we said at the start of the season on Sunday Vibes that a lot of the business that Fulham had conducted, albeit sizable business, was very good. But then all of a sudden, when you change profile of manager from Jukanovic to Ranieri, a lot of these signings don't suit the brand of football that he wants to play, and it becomes a bad window in retrospect, doesn't it? And now with Scott Parker coming in, maybe somewhere between the two, he might strike a better balance. He wants to see a more positive brand of football played, but be defensively sound. I'm not sure if you entrust that squad in the Championship. It's a delicate sort of
to Parker. I agree. I mean,
isn't it?
The weird thing is
Balancing
that
act.
they're quite progressive in the way that they find players. Like I think they actually got most of their attacking players were pretty smart acquisitions, but they just didn't do enough work on the defence. On the other hand, a club like Huddersfield are much more progressive and kind of they think outside the box more when it comes to hiring managers. I think if you wedded those two processes, so if Fulham went out and said, okay, well we're buying all these players clearly based on stats and based on like statistically led recruitment, maybe we're going to go and try and get somebody like David Wagner. I think actually that would probably help them a lot because at the moment it's kind of like they've gone 2/3 of the way to progressing by bringing in like these interesting players, but they haven't done the last and probably most important thing, which is find a progressive coach that matches up with them.
I totally reject the premise that if they'd stuck with the squad that survived in the Championship, that they would have stayed in the Premier or been in a better position than they are now.
Especially because they lost a lot of key players. Like the loss of Matty Targett is a big loss.
They lost both fullbacks.
A club like Fulham, and then you look at Ryan Sessegnon, so young, you can't be asking him to play 40 Premier League games in the same way that you can ask him to in the Championship and he wins Player of the Year. So that step up is huge.
Yeah.
Which is where, for me, I think though that Ryan Sessegnon now, for a player's perspective, has to leave Fulham. For a club's perspective, I'm sure they're going to be keen to keep him. But for a player, you can't go as what is he now, 19?
Yeah.
18,
Up
19,
into the Premier League, back down to the Championship.
Why not? I think you get plenty of minutes. Like the thing is about Sessegnon,
I think you can get as many minutes. I think you can get as many minutes. Well, maybe not as many because Fulham you're going to start every game probably in the Championship. But at a mid-level Premier League team, you could get a lot.
But I just don't think they'll come in
left
for him.
backs as well. But do you
But
think
he's
he's
not
going to have
gonna
the
play
same
left back.
problem with in terms of being priced out of a move?
I don't think he's going to play left back. Like I don't think at the moment like I would trust him defensively to play left back. He'd need to go to a side that plays three at the back, I think, and plays a wing back. This season actually, weirdly, I've seen people say that he hasn't had a good season, but I don't know what they expect of an 18-year-old in the Premier. He's got 2 goals, 5 assists, which I think is a really good
Not
return.
starting many games either.
I think that's a great
particularly
return for a kid in his first season in the Premier League.
My worry would be though, if I
But
was
he's not good
Fulham,
enough that I'd start him as a winger for a top club, and he's not defensive enough that I'd start him as a fullback.
But my worry would potentially be that a club like, I talk about this on the podcast as well, a club like RB Leipzig go, okay, you're in the Championship now, here's a bit of money, you come play for us, maybe 60% of the games you'll get featured in, or 50% of the games. You're competing for silverware here and playing in Europe, or you can play
But
the
it's not in their
Championship.
business model to shed 30, 40 million pounds on a player like.
I don't know. I think they'd be willing to. I think they'd be willing to ship out on Premier League
I
players.
think
let's not forget they big 28 for Adeloma Lookman.
I mean,
That's true.
but that went up progressively, didn't it? The 28 was like their Callum Hudson-Odoi situation where they wanted to start
I think
out
Everton
at,
just
at
basically
12,
said we're
at
not gonna
15,
send-
and Everton are so cash rich they can afford to hoard players as well, like a lot of the Premier League's elite. What I'd say, I mean, they've got such an extensive scouting network. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to see that. I think he'd bang at RB Leipzig, but they probably would be confident they could go out and find a player who profiles quite similarly for.
Well, they went and bought
Cheap.
a really exciting young left back from the Argentinian league, Saraki, last summer. So, I mean, it's on the other hand, it's entirely possible Nagelsmann comes in and says, my system is going to be 3 at the back. We're going to be incredibly reliant on our left wing back. or somebody who can play left wing back and as a winger.
Yeah.
Sessegnon's my guy. But I think the problem is at the moment his attacking output isn't quite enough to be a starting forward, and I think it's actually better if he goes and gets 3,000 minutes in the Championship than gets 800 minutes in a top flight.
It's an interesting point. I mean, my player is also a left back, so I may as well jump in while we're talking about this. I think that Ben Chilwell
Yes, love him.
has to
Old
stand
wet
out
look
as
Ben.
the... Obviously, like, we could mention the likes of Ruben Neves and that, couldn't we? But these are all players we've mentioned to death on this show, so we're trying to be a little bit different. I'm going to bring up Ben Chilwell because in terms of like the outstanding young left backs in the league, he's probably number one, I think, maybe. I look at the likes of obviously...
Yeah, I can't think of anyone else really.
I mean, Luke Shaw's actually had a pretty decent season.
Mendy
all jokes
sat out
aside.
the whole
Benjamin
year.
Mendy sat out nearly the entire year. Marcos Alonso has been horrible.
Kolasinac had a great season, but not really as a left back, as a wing back.
Obviously, Robertson is probably the best left back in the league,
Robertson's
but not
been
a
great.
young left back in the same way a 22-year-old Ben Chilwell is. Ben Chilwell, for me, is in line for a massive move this summer.
This is his breakout campaign. He's made more appearances this season than in any other season, hasn't he? So I can totally kind of understand your perspective of, he's made the biggest jump, let's say.
Well,
It's going to cost a fortune.
He signed a contract extension last year, so he is going to cost an absolute fortune.
Yeah, what's that,
He's
2023 or something ridiculous?
I think so. He's also capped by England now, isn't he?
Yeah.
As well, so that probably adds more
He's pretty
premium
much
on
first
top.
choice
I think 6-7 caps in 2018. Yeah, exactly. He's
Yeah, so
becoming
that
a
adds
regular.
premium on top of that as well. And then you look at the options of clubs that are going to want him. For me, like, he would be a really good signing for Manchester City.
I think he'd be a good signing for any of the top sides except
But
for Liverpool. They're the only side who don't need him.
Yeah, but I think Manchester City on paper don't
amazing for
necessarily need him
Arsenal
with
or
Benny
Spurs.
Mendy there. But at what stage do you
theory.
think City go, okay, Ben, it's not like he's obviously a fabulous left back,
He can't
but
be trusted
we can't
to-
trust him to run out a 50-game season. And I know that Zinchenko has done the job there. Is he really the long-term option, do you think, for Pep at left back?
Probably not.
I really don't know. I mean, he continues to excel in that role, doesn't he? But I like Ben Chilwell is first and foremost, he's just bloody solid.
Yeah.
But he has added to his game in terms of going forward this campaign.
Dribbling's good.
His dribbling is good. I think he's averaging over 1.5 dribbles a game, and his key passes are around 1.2, which again is solid, especially in a Leicester side that for the most part of the season has played a slightly more reserved brand of attacking football. And if Ricardo Pereira's lining up on the other wing and you have him bombing down the right-hand side, maybe Chilwell has had to, consciously be a little bit more solid. So I would expect to see his numbers spike massively at a bigger team. I tweeted out early in the season that I could see him somewhere like Arsenal, profiling well under a manager like Unai Emery.
But Kolasinac has played okay in that left wing back.
I think he's a better defender than Kolasinac.
He's a better defender. He's a much worse attacker than Kolasinac, but he's a much better defender.
Yeah.
And Arsenal can afford to let a little bit of attacking output slide.
But we haven't
and it's
seen
not
him
like
in that-
Chilwell is going to see attacking output crater. It's just not going to be as good.
But we haven't seen him play as much as Kolasinac in the wing-back role. We've seen him play as a left-back in a four.
But the reason we've played with three at the back this season is because our defence was so bad that Emery's solution was to take one attacker off the field and put an extra defender on. I think if you had a better left back and some better centre backs, he'd be much more inclined to play four at the back. And he's moved towards four at the back over the season because that's what Unai Emery does. He plays four at the back.
He would be an outstanding option. Like, it's not a shame they've been banned because they deserve it. But Chelsea, in terms of, are going to be desperate for a left back. And Ben Chilwell would have been an outstanding candidate.
More and more with somebody like Ben Chilwell. In a way, I don't want him to go to City because he will have to share duty with Mendy when Mendy comes back. Whereas, obviously I'm an Arsenal fan, but I also like the fact that if he went to Arsenal, he would just immediately go into the side and play every game. I mean, the one thing I'd say, the only possible real reservation you'd have about him is that he has actually played in a team which was very, very, very good defensively. Like Claude Puel's Leicester team was an extremely good counter-pressing defensive unit with amazing protection in the midfield from Ndidi and a good defender next to him in Harry Maguire.
In terms of their expected goals conceded, they've got the 5th best defence in the league this season, Leicester.
That doesn't shock me at all.
Yeah.
Like when you watch them, they're just really hard to get through. And I think, Chilwell looks though like he can be. Like it's not like buying a guy from Atletico Madrid. This is a guy who can also do things.
The problem
like,
is,
he can
though,
get you up the wing.
And the problem remains is that we've seen Leicester play hardball with their best assets before, and obviously learn from the N'Golo Kante £30 million. If Riyad Mahrez is going for 75 million last summer, like Ben Chilwell probably becomes a £60 million asset.
Yeah, well, I think if you can, if you know he's going to solve your left back slot for 10 years, I don't think that's that bad. And it also, I mean, like Leicester have already been linked with Kieran Tierney, and so you could imagine if Brendan Rodgers says to them, look, I think that we as a club can ship Chilwell out for 50, bring in Tierney for 25 or something, turn over a profit while basically not seeing a massive drop in performance, like maybe in the long term even seeing, you know, the same level or an improvement.
Oh, so
I think that's a sensible thing to do.
I completely agree.
Yeah, Tierney
also.
I think
He's
that's
just
fab-
as good as Chilwell, but
I
by
think that's a
virtue-
fabulous option, actually. I think potentially let Chilwell go this summer. There's a lot of clubs that need fullbacks. Fullbacks is one of the most in-demand positions in the world. So yeah, let him go. And bring in Kieran Tierney.
Though because of what you said, because of Chilwell being expensive, you might see clubs just skip that and say, okay, well, if Leicester are going to go for you've seen that with Arsenal. Arsenal were interested in Chilwell 3 years ago. Didn't pull the trigger. Then last summer, everyone was kind of like, I think he's going to be a bit too expensive because he was just starting to come into the England team after the World Cup. And now, you know, I'm certainly seeing Arsenal linked with Tierney a lot. And I think it's just because, well, firstly, I think Tierney's probably a better attacker than Chilwell. And secondly, you think, well, why should we basically pay for you to upgrade your squad overall?
Yeah.
Why would we be privy to you doing, you know, better, more efficient?
I'm sure
business?
Rodgers, though, is going to be desperate to keep him.
I would be, I'd be delighted to see. Well, I'd be more comfortable, let's say, with Arsenal, you know, buying someone like Ben Chilwell. To lose our best player and our manager to Leicester, all in the space of 12 months, would be absolutely sickening. I do think he's got a higher ceiling than Leicester as well, Kieran Tierney. I think he can skip that stepping stone and go straight to someone like Arsenal and have just as good an impact as Ben Chilwell.
Has he played as a wing back, or is he better as a left back?
I mean, he can play centre back. He plays left centre back for his country. He plays left back for us. We predominantly played kind of a 4-2-3-1 under Rodgers, but in Europe we look better in a 3-4-3.
And was he a wing back in the centre back?
Yeah, and he was averaging about, I think 3 dribbles plus per 90 in the Europa League.
His deep progressions are absolutely outrageous.
Yeah.
Just go back to what
his
we were talking
XG build-up.
We were talking about on the podcast
0.9.
about RB Leipzig under Nagelsmann. Nagelsmann is probably going to be after a left wing back this summer, potentially, if he does stick with his Hoffenheim system. Tierney would be an outrageous option.
I think if you're looking at 50 for Chilwell and you can get Tierney for under 30, I personally would just say I want Tierney. Like, generally speaking, Celtic play hardball in the media, but they actually sell for very reasonable prices. Like
Yes.
they sold Moussa Dembele for a very reasonable price because they know that they can always go and find new ones. Like, so maybe they're not going to find it easy to replace Tierney, but they're going to find it probably easy to replace him in a way that will continue to win them the SPFL.
Yeah, it's easier for us to blood that talent, to figure out if they're a first team, like worthy of being a first team player or a long-term option than in most other leagues. I mean, Moussa Dembele's expected goals and assists now, despite being a rotation option at Lyon, puts him in the top 5 in Europe.
Yeah, it's outrageous.
Absolutely ridiculous.
He's 22.
And we are only parted with 20 mil.
Yeah.
And Odsonne Edouard will probably go through the same evolution and we'll probably sell him for 30, you know, in 2 years' time. So yeah, Celtic unfortunately has just become one of the primo breeding grounds for top European talent. But aside from that, because I am going to get upset if we keep talking about Kieran Tierney leaving, I'm bringing Felipe Anderson to the table.
Yeah, I mean,
Now,
this is probably the best shout.
He's the best player.
He's the most talented player.
Yeah, I can
outside
see
the
why
top six.
Chilwell will be more valuable and Chilwell's more likely to go this summer, but I think Anderson is probably the absolute best player.
And despite hitting the same roadblocks as your guys, probably, in that he cost 40 mil when he came in, he's proved to be, you know, worth more than that to his team. It'll probably be priced out of a move as a result. Like, they'll be wanting Riyad Mahrez money in order for him to move on, and he's probably straddling that age now, 25, 26, where a top club will think, if only this guy, you know, had this impact a couple of years ago. Obviously went through a couple of big injuries at Lazio, put up great expected goals and assist numbers at Lazio. I think 2015-16 was probably his pinnacle, and he's kind of working his way back to those numbers again, although hasn't scored since the start of 2019 and has seen a little bit of a dip. I think it's 0.39 expected goals and assists this season, which is
It's pretty much his worst, isn't it?
Yeah,
Of his career.
it's his
But this is also his
worst,
first in the Prem.
but not. For, I mean, what is it? 8 goals, 4 assists, 9 goals, 4 assists. I
And
think.
also, he gives you so much even when he's not scoring. That's
Just brilliant in transition.
that's what I like about him.
Like 2.4 tackles, I think, which puts him third in the West Ham squad. I think only 8 players make more tackles than him. I robbed that from your podcast.
No,
notes.
8 people. It wasn't like they make more tackles per game than him. I think only 8 players in the Premier League have made more tackles than him in total.
Completed tackles.
yeah.
I think it's around 3.5 tackles and interceptions per game, which for a winger who
It's
sees,
crazy.
he sees as much of the ball as a central midfielder. That's how involved he is. I think it's around 45 passes a game with West Ham's play. So he's a guy that, I mean, maybe by virtue of playing left back, left wing back at Lazio, like he doesn't mind that defensive work, but when he's not involved, he gets involved. And for West Ham to have a player like that is invaluable, really.
He's struggled though recently.
But isn't that just because I think teams are keying on him now in a way they know that everything goes through him? When you've got like a fully fit Lanzini, maybe that'll be more difficult for them. You know, in the same, it's kind of like a small version of Liverpool's issue, right? Where like people were saying, oh, well, Salah's not been as good as he was last season. Well, first I think Salah's been amazing, but well, Mane's output has gone up as a result because teams are committing more defenders to Salah and it gives more space for Mane.
Yeah.
I think if you would, if Chelsea didn't have a transfer ban and Anderson went there as the most attacking in that 3-man midfield, who could also interchange with the wide players, I think he'd be amazing. I think he'd be so good.
I feel like a club of Chelsea's standing, maybe he's been linked to Real Madrid recently. Are they ever going to pay 65 to 75 million pounds for a player who's had consistent injuries throughout his career?
Look at the trajectory of what's West Ham striker called? Sorry, the one that's going to go to
Marko
China.
Arnautovic.
Marko Arnautovic. How his value went from 25 to kind of 50 by virtue of having one good season. Like, it's not totally unthinkable that a club could come in my opinion, for a £60 million bid for a 25-year-old Felipe Anderson, 25, 26. And back in the Brazil squad for the first time in 4 or 5 years, like his stock has never been higher. And I do think having someone who is adept at playing in that 3 or in a midfield 3 or in a forward 3 is very rare. And West Ham, I mean, he's probably worth more than £60 million to them, which again makes him even harder to get out of the club.
I'm not Pellegrini's biggest fan either.
I mean,
I really like Pellegrini.
that kind of, you know, I mean, there's 13 points between 6th and 7th with a goal difference of plus 15. So that chasm is still there. But when you look at the underlying numbers of a Wolves or a Leicester, they are not knocking at the door, but they're not too far off. I think Wolves have the 3rd best expected defence in the league, Leicester 5th. In order to match the attacking output of
Palace
top,
are good as well.
Yeah, Palace are good. A top 6 side, you're looking at having over 12 shots per game, which Leicester and Wolves are nearing. If you were one of those clubs and you had a lot of money to spend, I would maybe think about going to war with someone like West Ham, especially if you can get 50, 60 million pound for Ben Chilwell.
You go and try and get Felipe Anderson.
I think if you're a Wolves or a Leicester, he might help you get even closer to breaking into the top 6.
So I think he can aim higher than that. Like I really do think that like if I were a club like Borussia Dortmund and I was like, I'm losing Pulisic, I'm probably gonna lose Sancho as well. Royce is old and often injured. You know, they were talking about having a big bid for Zaha last year. I think Anderson is better than Zaha in pretty much every conceivable way. Like he's better than Zaha at everything.
The numbers have bared that out massively this season, haven't they? Like Zaha as a second striker, fine. As a winger, less so.
Good at good at transition, but that's it.
In a much worse
that's
side,
it.
though.
But Anderson, what do you mean?
Crystal Palace and West Ham?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say much worse.
I don't think.
Zaha is the only attacking threat at Palace. Like Benteke, I don't think he's scored a Premier League goal this season. I think Andros Townsend
MacArthur's
is
useful in central midfield. I mean, Andros
But
Townsend.
that's still it. Like,
That's it. Like at least Marko Arnautovic has put up some numbers for West Ham. Lanzini, when he's fit, comes back.
Lanzini hasn't really played. Like I mean, it has pretty much been the Anderson show.
And
like,
it's been
for sure.
After Arnautovic and Anderson,
we talk
it's
about
been
how,
Chicharito,
like,
and Chicharito's
But you look at like how Felipe Anderson hasn't scored a league goal in 2019.
Yeah.
That's because they've keyed onto him. Well, Zaha's had people keying onto him for 2 years because there's no output from anybody else at Palace.
Yeah, and he wasn't great in a lot of that time, or like he kind of got lucky in a lot of situations. Like, I mean, I just think like Anderson has shown an ability. Like last season at Lazio, even when he was in and out of the side, got a goal or assist every 90 minutes.
Yeah, don't get me
Like,
wrong,
I mean,
he's a fabulous
You know,
player.
you know
I
when
say like
players
he's-
key on to Anderson, I
he's
think
better
he's
than
got
Zaha in every area,
he's got
isn't it?
more at his disposal to deal with that and to evolve or to kind of
Yeah.
sidestep that issue. Whereas I think players, when you identify what Zaha wants to do,
Yeah.
which is hog the touchline and then cut in, like
Yeah.
it makes it. He's
But I'm
a more
saying,
manageable.
my point is he's in
opposition.
it, like, you can give Benteke 100 yards of space in the box and he still puts it wide.
but this in a way is kind of my point. Like
Feel
Zaha,
so sorry for
there are
Benteke.
players who need the ball all the time and they look good when they do that. So Zaha looks good because defenders kind of come at him and he can just beat them like one after the other. But I think if you put him in a bigger side where he wasn't getting the ball constantly to run up the pitch, you'd be like, what does Zaha do? He doesn't arrive in the final third and get good shots. He doesn't create. Pretty much all he does is dribble, which is good. But Anderson can also dribble and he can also create and he can also score and he can also defend and he can play wide and he can play in a midfield three and he can play wing back. And
Yeah,
so
he's tooled up.
imagine if you had him at Dortmund and there was actually a threat on the other flank, then I think suddenly you'd see much bigger output from Anderson. Whereas I think if you put Zaha in that team and there was a threat on the other flank, I think you'd start seeing all the possession going through the guy on the other flank rather than through Zaha.
And we're missing, like, you have that set piece threat as well with Felipe Anderson. Like, some of his shot locations haven't been great this season. That's maybe why his XG for goals has kind of gone down to, is it 0.15, I think, which is the joint worst in the last 4 or 5 seasons. But that's probably again, because he takes a lot of free kicks. But yeah, just super talented on multiple fronts. But like you boys have said, might be priced out of a move ultimately.
And also his
would be
injury
really
record.
interesting to see him go.
Yeah,
to
his injury
His
record.
injury
Head back
record
to
is
the
a big
continent.
black mark against his name, isn't it?
True.
Yeah.
But you also with
Clocked
Anderson,
up a lot of
like,
minutes this season though.
leaving aside all the other stuff like like his stats and his the roles he can play for different kinds of sides. The thing about Felipe Anderson is he just makes me enjoy games that I would not otherwise enjoy. I don't think I'd really enjoy watching West Ham, but I enjoy it because Felipe Anderson's there. Like Felipe Anderson reminds me what's fun about the Premier League, and similarly, like Ben Chilwell. Would I rather have Ben Chilwell in my side than Ricardo Pereira? Probably, but I do actually find Ricardo Pereira more fun to watch, like because he just does like mad more often.
Yeah, Ricardo Pereira would probably be a candidate if it, like, for this actual category. We would probably have put him in there if it wasn't for Ben Chilwell on the other flank.
Also, he's been moved around a lot. So when you look
Left
at his
wing,
stats,
right
you're
wing,
like,
yeah.
well, I see
Stewart.
good creative numbers because you've played on the wing a bit, and I see good defensive numbers because you played at fullback a bit, and it's hard to piece out like what would he be like if he played right wing back every week.
I'm not sure if a top side would also entrust him because of his attacking endeavour in a back four at right back on a permanent basis. Like stats wise, all right, send him to Manchester United, but
I think
would that be feasible?
I think another player that's worth mentioning, we've mentioned him before, is Idrissa Gueye. Still putting
Gueye's
up
great.
ridiculous defensive numbers. Big bids from PSG, rejected in January.
Well, his
Does he
team-
stay? Does he go?
Well, his
He's too
teammate
old
as
now.
well. You got Luca Digne, who's had the expected goals and assists of a
creative numbers, yeah.
midfielder this season. He's been their sole creator on the left-hand side, hasn't he? £18 million, like Everton. If this was the Everton of 4 or 5 years ago, we're licking their lips. They could turn 20, 30 million on this guy, couldn't they? Off the back of one good season. But it's not. It's Everton owned by a billionaire, so he's not going anywhere, I don't think.
Unless it's like a £60 million
I mean,
bid.
just again, that felt like his last opportunity for a big move.
Yeah.
29.
I think there were rumours that they'd been offered 40 mil, and I just cannot understand why you wouldn't take that. Like, don't get me wrong, Idrissa Gueye's amazing, but at his age, 40 mil, I take it, and I say, you know what, you can find other defensive midfielders. There are actually a lot of exciting young defensive midfielders around. Like, I mean, as sad as it is, I'd probably take the money.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't
Indeed.
mentioned any Watford players either, and Watford are having a great season.
Yeah, I like
Partially down to
Doucouré.
Garcia doing really well.
I think Capu's been fantastic in that midfield.
Yeah.
Capu's a really smart player.
But I think Doucouré does the most in that side. I think Capu's probably a better player, but Doucouré,
He does less defensively than Capu,
Yeah.
and less ball progression actually.
I think the majority of that transition goes through Doucouré though. The majority of that play, I think he's averages the most passes in that side, and they play a very narrow style of football, and then that four kind of like two banks of two in midfield. I quite like Will Hughes when I see him as well, but his attacking output, he kind of gets to the final third, and it's like, yeah, this is where I.
And I guess like Watford are almost a little bit more than the sum of their parts, aren't they? I think Gracia's getting really good output out of the quality of player he's got there.
They're gonna be quite exciting next year because they've got a couple of guys coming back from loan. They've got Juan Camilo Hernandez, who's had a really good season. They've got Dodi Lukebakio, who's had an amazing season in the Bundesliga. I mean, like they've got two players who are under 21 who are in double figures for goals in Europe's top 5 leagues. Who are on loan.
But this is,
which is pretty exciting.
I hadn't heard of those guys.
I'm sure that he will stay, but there will be clubs interested in Gracia, I think, in the summer, given what he's done with this Watford side.
I mean, he's not lasted longer than 2 years.
He's quite Puelli. He's quite Puelli.
But he's signed a deal, a long-term deal. The first manager to re-sign a deal in the Pozzo era. So hopefully it will last. Going back to Everton, like Richarlison's not really progressing the way I'd like him to. When we're looking at best players outside of the top 6, I suppose the second part of that question is about selling them on, isn't it? But
not the biggest fan of the service he receives, though. I think Bernard's been okay.
I don't like Bernard.
He's been okay.
He's been okay
for a free transfer.
Walcott's been bad. Calvert-Lewin still looks promising, but that's all he is. Tosun's terrible.
And Sigurdsson, he's been okay.
He scores a bit, but he takes free kicks and stuff. And I don't know, like
so his actual service. I think
Richarlison's still got 0.5 expected goals and assists per game. Like if he were a 21-year-old coming into the league for the first time this season, we'd be like, wow, that's really exciting. But he's now done that 2 years in a row.
I think it's just because his numbers haven't changed really from. I was looking this morning from his time at Watford. But don't get me wrong, his numbers, considering he had one season with was it Fluminense or Flamengo under his belt, prior to that, like we've discussed his good shot location, can play, he's adept along that front three, but it's just this kind of a bit of a shame that he's not comfortably that £50 million player at this point, because he looked great at the start of the season, didn't he? He's probably not going to be sold on for the next couple of years. But.
Yeah, definitely not. But who do you guys at home think has been the best player outside of the top 6 that deserves a big money move this coming summer? You can let us know on Twitter, on Reddit, and in the comments below right now.
Yeah, boy.
Moving on to quick fire questions now then. The first one was sent in by Gopal Sharma 10. He says, now that it looks like De Ligt is on his way to Barca, should United go for Umtiti? Where, I'll rephrase the question. What happens to Umtiti this season? Because Lenglet has obviously strode into the team. PK's still there. De Ligt's joining. Umtiti's future is where?
I mean, Umtiti's still... Well, Todibo as well. They brought in this teenager. But I think... I mean, Umtiti, I'd still feel very confident in saying is their best centre-back.
Yeah.
Especially in the Barcelona sense. Lenglet is a lot slower than him. I think Umtiti is extremely quick, very good in the one-on-one, really good at reading the game. The only issue is injury record. If Umtiti had flawless injury record, he'd be in the team every week.
I felt like the long-term plan was for Lenglet to replace PK because they profiled quite similarly, left-footed, both good at stepping out, making brave passes, like competent distributors. And Samuel Umtiti was just like, listen, I'll do the out-and-out defending. And it looked like the defence was going to fall apart in his absence at the end of last campaign and various points this season. I mean, defensively, I think this is the worst they've been in 10, 11 years.
They're just generally not great.
Without Umtiti. So, I mean, it seems odd that...
I can't see them selling him.
It'd be at the expense of the Frenchman.
I think if they're gonna try and fund the De Ligt move with a sale, they'll do it with Coutinho's sale.
Yeah,
that seems more likely, and probably makes more sense to me because you still need 4 centre backs at least, and Todibo I don't think you can count as one of them just yet. So Piqué, Lenglet, Umtiti, and De Ligt is a pretty insane lineup, and you could even do a 3 at the back if you wanted.
What about Vermaelen though, Pato?
Oh yeah, Vermaelen, great.
I mean, De Ligt's still not confirmed either. I still think there'll be a lot of other clubs putting their noses on the line for De Ligt.
1,000%. But you can see him, especially with the relationship that Ajax and Barcelona are building now. You can see him kind of wanting to go to the Blaugrana.
Hopefully he doesn't. I'd like to see him go to Juve, De Ligt.
Really?
as a replacement for one of the Chiellini, Bonucci, Barzagli trio.
That would be outrageous.
But let's move on to the next one then. Who should Liverpool sign in the transfer window in order to strengthen their squad? That was sent in by Ronak Othari 4.
I mean, what do they need at the moment? I mean,
Back up right back.
The thing about
Another centre-back.
The thing about Liverpool is, I suppose, I just went straight to midfield there. They've got players that they should be getting more out of, haven't they?
Yeah.
In Naby Keita. So when he actually fits into the side, that might feel like a new signing to an extent, but that feels like a bit of a lazy answer to this question.
And a fit Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain will make a big difference as well.
What do you think about Naby Keita? Because I actually read reports this week.
Yes,
I can't remember what it was in.
That they were willing to sell
They
him.
were gonna cut the losses and let go. Naby Keita.
Unless something serious has happened off the pitch, you just wouldn't do that. Like after a year, like unless you're convinced that he has an injury problem that will never be solved, or he's fallen out with somebody behind the scenes, for example Klopp. Like I don't really see why they do that after a year at his age. Like I think they'll probably keep him unless something serious has happened.
Been unfortunate that his poor form has also coincided with Wijnaldum probably playing his best football. James Milner making himself indispensable in the defensive department, I guess, and Fabinho getting progressively better. All these things highlight the fact that he's not the player they bought.
But
or
there have been
expected
times. There have been
to
times.
impact
Like I
the side
remember
straight
watching
away.
the Merseyside derby against Everton and thinking, this is prime Naby Keita.
Yeah, he can do things that those players can't.
And, and instead him bringing on Adam Lallana.
And the first leg against Bayern, like he was the best player on the pitch. Like the first leg against Bayern, when they were unfortunate to draw 0-0, he was comfortably the best player on the pitch. He was just waltzing past defenders. He was putting in an incredible amount of work himself. Like that looked like the Keita you want to see. You know, he's clearly more talented than Wijnaldum. Doesn't quite play the same position as Fabinho. Milner is going to be on his way out over the next few years. Lallana will probably go this summer.
Christ,
So-
imagine if they went in for De Ligt.
I
The
mean-
Dutch partnership, mate.
I mean,
would you like to see that as
I
a
think Joe Gomez
Orange
though, put some
fan?
respect on his name.
I don't really
Gomez
want
can play right back against
anyone good to go to Liverpool, but they do need another good centre back, because even if Gomez comes into the side, their backups are still probably not quite good enough. They need a backup left back because their backup at the moment is Moreno, who's terrible.
And he's going to Barca.
Well, he's leaving certainly. God help us if he goes to Barcelona. And right back, obviously, Klein went out on loan.
He'll return though, surely.
But you'd have thought if they're sending him out on loan, that's like a precursor to selling him.
Did he go to
Maybe,
Bournemouth?
Yeah. No, he went to
Yeah.
Bournemouth.
Yeah, they'll probably sign him on a permanent, won't they?
Yeah,
If they can,
I think
I
if you can get a few mil for him,
What
then
if
I think
they-
there's like 12
they
mil
got
or
What if it was a
Solanke
part
on, didn't
exchange for Nathan Ake?
Mm.
What do we think to that? Ake, not of
It's all
a
right.
league-winning standard. I think there's a lot more to come from Nathan Ake. I could see him prospering next to Virgil van Dijk.
Yeah, I
Quite
think that's fine.
possibly. I think they might. I think they will go for a centre back in the summer though. Quite heavy.
Rugani, I'm trying. Who
Put some
top level
decent money.
centre
I
half
don't see why Rugani would go.
Put some decent money in
that
there
are,
for
that
a
are
centre back.
available.
Go and stick some money down
From
for
the
Issa
off.
Diop and see how much you can get him off West Ham for.
Issa Diop. Are you much more convinced by Issa Diop than Nathan Ake?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think so.
yeah.
Like the leader of that West Ham backline already.
But the advantage of Ake is that he can back up left back to some extent. Like that's the thing about Ake, and also I think Diop. I don't know. Ake's
Imagine Issa
probably
Diop.
I
on
think
much,
Virgil
much
van
lower
Dijk.
wages than Diop is.
Matt
Yeah.
Wayne is probably, I think, the better reader of the game in that West Ham defence.
Maybe,
But you've got Van Dijk to read the
But I
game.
think
I'm
Diop's a
not sure
better
you
reader
need-
of the game than Ake. So I mean,
It's
kind of a
tough,
bit
isn't it?
of a-
Shopping around for a centre back at the moment.
Not easy.
I don't really trust myself to like
Easy.
gauge centre backs until I've watched like pretty much a
Yeah.
whole season of them, and it's
Yeah.
impossible to do that.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of clubs looking for centre backs this summer. We've already talked about obviously Man United are going to be needing them. Juventus probably going to eventually need to turn them over.
Yeah, Leipzig are going to get
Bayern
raided
have done
this summer. I think.
Bayern have done brilliant business bringing in two centre backs already in Luca Hernandez and Benjamin Pavard, who can also operate at full back areas.
Yeah.
Kim Pembe is going nowhere.
It's going to be a big summer. Next quick fire question from Liam Rafe, LFC22. He says, "What are your thoughts on reports from L'Equipe saying Mourinho wants the Lyon or Monaco job?"
What?
Monaco makes sense, but maybe that's just because
What?
Ricardo Carvalho went there. They just always had like old Portuguese guys playing at Monaco. But I mean, at the same time, if Monaco got Jardim back, why would they downgrade to
What
Mourinho?
happened with Jardim? Did he sign a full-time contract, or was he there just on a week-by-week basis?
I thought so. I think he'd just gone back and signed like a couple of year contract.
Yeah.
I mean,
Really?
As for Lyon, like I don't think Genesio is all that. I think he's fine at best. He's not particularly highly rated. They've got really good talent, but I'm not sure I'd want to give that talent to Mourinho.
I wouldn't either.
It's a really fun attacking side.
Yeah, I mean, I'm only thinking of their forward six, but it's sort of shades of Manchester United, like the better part of their squad being the forward unit and not being able to extrapolate the best out of that. So do you trust him with
Such a non-Mourinho move, man.
with
like,
Fekir,
got good
Depay,
fullbacks there.
Moussa
but it's
Dembele?
like young, exciting talent. Like he is like made bread and butter off managing like experienced
I could see him liking that.
staple names.
Like Aouar, and Ndombele, like that solid. There's a solid spine there that feels a little bit Mourinho in essence, I guess.
Still
But
feel like he's going to
fullbacks
end
are
up at
good, and
Inter.
Yeah, I just think that he's only had one side that was actually exciting to watch, and that was his Real Madrid team. And I just don't know.
is that when Mesut was running the show?
Yeah, and it was a Khedira Alonso midfield. It was really fun. Like I'm not sure he's going to open the taps up at Lyon in a way they need to. But maybe they do need their next coach to be a little bit more savvy defensively, because at the moment they're a bit. That's probably what lets them down, because they're an amazing attacking side. But I don't think he's going to go there. If he goes there, he's got to accept the fact that he's probably not going to win the league. And I don't think he ever accepts that.
I could see him fitting in better with like Project Marseille, which is American owners want to pump a shed load of cash into the club, and Rudy Garcia he's brought them back up from 7th to 4th. But again, this season it's kind of the same problem at Lyon. They're struggling to really reaffirm themselves as second, third best team in the league. Like,
Yeah,
Yes.
Jose's future's pretty sketchy, isn't it?
it's weird.
International football just seems like
And
the
then,
answer.
and then just disappear.
Yeah, I completely agree. Right, let's finish off with a couple of personal questions then. I'm picking 2 food-related topics here.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Favourite type of pizza? This is sent in by Matthew Rua.
4 cheeses.
4 cheeses. Straight in with 4 cheeses.
Yeah, 4 cheeses. I've red meat. I've tried to wean off of it. That my insides are made of straw, and red meat's not necessarily great for that. But I'm a bit of a sucker for blue cheese. Like which I hated as a youngster. What things did you hate as a youngster? There's a little deviation, but like olives and blue cheese. I love that sort of.
Olives, yeah, I really didn't like
that's my
olives.
jam.
I didn't like mushrooms that
Didn't
much.
like beer when I was a kid. That
I
tasted
still
beer.
don't.
now
I still
I'm a
don't like
legend.
beer. Yeah.
Yeah, go on, pizza. Back to pizza.
4 cheeses, Pat.
Anything with ricotta. I really like ricotta on it. If you got ricotta and then like a salty meat, like a pancetta or guanciale or something like
A
that,
guanciale, to be expected.
that's what I want.
See, like mine's so different. I'll just get pepperoni, probably, and usually burnt. I can't have any floppage on a pizza. I've got to have a good level of
You
rigidity.
specifically requested this. He did it in Rome as well, didn't you?
I didn't request it in Rome. They give it to me in Rome. I asked. I was.
You went to the home of
I was
pizza and
selecting.
asked them
I
to
was.
cook
I
it.
select the more burnt pizza.
Okay.
Like I prefer something that's a little bit crispy. I don't like that big floppage with cheese dripping off it. Get that out. Get that.
You don't
in the
like
bin.
a correctly cooked
All right.
pizza.
So what's the most overrated pizza?
The most
That's Domino's for me.
overrated pizza?
Oh, what, like company
Domino's,
that make
no,
it?
man.
No.
Domino's is fine. It's just a totally
Domino's
different thing.
is
to
about
a normal pizza.
£45.
Papa John's.
Very
I've never
expensive.
not had a Papa John's with a hair in.
Papa John's. Papa John's is actually.
So
a
you've
similar
had one
price to
Papa John's with a
Domino's.
hair
It's
in
not
it?
good.
Yeah, no, I've had at least 3 Papa John's affairs in at uni.
That's mental.
I'd say most pizza, but Pizza Hut actually is terrible.
Yeah, Pizza Hut.
Pizza Hut's so bad.
Pizza Hut is
and I
so
say that I like shitty pizza. Like,
Although if you want to
go
sponsor
Pizza Hut,
us,
it's rubbish.
then we will say it's good.
I'd happily order a Domino's, but after I finish it, I'm fat shaming myself in the mirror.
Yeah, but that's good. Domino's is for a day when you want to hate yourself.
Yeah, it's
Whereas
true.
Pizza Hut is for a day when you
It's your 12th birthday.
you're just out of options
And
if you're
then-
at Pizza Hut.
Right, last question then. Another
What about
food
the
related
salad
one.
bar
This
pizza?
is going to
What
be
a
very
depressing
short.
place to be.
Short
Not
term.
a patch on the salad bar at the Harvester, mate. Help yourself as many bowls as you want. Incredible.
How do each of you take your steaks? This is from JC Kingslayer.
It's got to be medium rare, right? But
I take mine rare.
But I got this problem chewing. Like my mouth is so dry. I just don't have enough.
But rare's
spittle.
juicier.
Yeah, no, but it involves more chewing. Like if it's a little bit more cooked, it slips down the old gullet, it goes down the old hatch.
Pate.
Rare, so bleeding, blue.
Not blue, I mean rare.
Yeah, I'd probably go medium rare. I don't want. I always say like I want it pink, but I don't want it bloody.
Yeah.
But I think but I think people get really people get shamed way too much about steak. You know, people are like, this is how you should have it.
I mean, never have it well done though.
I think you get to have steak however you want.
No, you don't.
You get to have steak however you want.
you don't.
And also, I feel like if you're in a
Horribly
good restaurant, sometimes with a particular cut of steak, if I don't know the cut that well, I will say I'm happy for like the chef to cook it the way that he wants to cook it, and assume that he knows that cut of meat better than I do.
True.
I think
but
that's
never
fine.
well done. No
Well,
chef will
on a-
ever give you a steak well done.
No,
Well, not if you
in
just
England
ask.
they will.
They will do.
On the continent,
They'll
like,
do-
yeah,
no, they'll do it
it
anyway.
offends every French chef.
And it also stinks. You ever cooked a steak to well done?
What are you eat?
What?
Not good. Not
You're
how it's
just
meant to be
you're
cooked.
just cooking with bad meat there. That's
Yeah,
gone
you're-
off.
you're
now.
using
Do you
bad
just
I'm having
leave-
steak tonight,
Do
actually.
you just leave it
I'm
out?
having steak tonight.
I think if people want their steak well
What,
done,
on a
that's fine.
Thursday, treating yourself to steak.
Yeah, well, no, Chloe, when she was in Gloucester, she got
Just
basically-
supreme and steak for this lad.
That,
Like,
when
he's crushing
when
it.
we're in back in Devon and stuff, and in Gloucester, we get like meat hampers.
All right,
So
yeah.
like you can get like 6 steaks, 30
like Donald
sausages,
Russell stuff.
all this sort of stuff, like proper farm. Like you go to a farm.
My sister went through a period of sending me one of these for my birthday
Yeah.
every year. It was fucking
Like
amazing.
you go down to like Donald's farm or whatever, and then you you basically just chucks it all in. He's like, yeah, it's 30 quid, and they're like steaks like
Chucks it all
this,
in.
and they're like in whoppers.
My
absolutely
mate
beautiful.
Jack
Sounds
used to
amazing.
work when he was 16 at a slaughterhouse, and he once brought home half a pig on his shoulder, took it onto the Arriva bus. Arriva, one of the worst public forms of transport you can possibly get.
It's on a bus.
Fuck
I mean,
you,
that
we
is
got-
wrong. Bro.
On the hottest day of the year in
Oh.
Leicester.
That's
It was
wrong.
literally slow cooking a pig on a top deck of the 85.
I mean, that's offensive.
disgusting. I'm amazed he didn't get kicked off.
But anyway, that is the end of the steak chat and the end of Sunday
Shout out,
Vibes for yet another week. If you've got any questions, please slam them in the comments below. Get us on Twitter, send them in on Reddit, all of the usual social media forums. Hamill, what else is coming up on the Football Daily Network this weekend?
So today, if you're watching this, prior to the Football Social going live, we're doing a Football Social. It's going to be me and Pat for the big games, although we're not watching the Old Firm, which I'm not happy about.
Yeah, big game.
We've got on
it's not a big
FBFC, we've got Sam Obaseki's first personal mastermind with Eric Lamela. That went live. Go and check that out. Non-league vlogs, and on Eurofootball Daily,
Scout report today, innit?
Well, Scout Report, but Stat Wars, the champions, and Stat Wars,
Yeah.
the league, it rages on.
Yes, thank you very much for watching, guys. Au revoir.